All right, I am back. So it's time to actually put some meat on the bones and start outlining. Now, thankfully, the AutoCrit Writer's Desk has a really great starting point for outlining, the story builder. I think it's really helpful. It more or less fits my needs to a T about what I like to do when it comes to outlining, at least to get started, and then I have the opportunity to expand further. So I am going to populate the story builder with all of my thoughts from the previous books. Things like my world building, any characters that are going to be recurring characters, I'm going to go ahead and put in. And then I will finally go in and I will start filling out the beat sheet. So you can see here, I've already started to fill out my world building and have all of my different things there involved with the world building and different factors. Now, it's not necessarily going to be something I'm going to use, like the grizzly bear from the first book. I don't know, or the crickets. The crickets were used. By a character in the first book for a certain purpose. I'm not sure whether or not I'm going to actually bring back any crickets, but I did just want to point out the different animals and things that I've already pre-established. So again, as I'm going through my story beats, I can always go back and I can see, all right, what options do I have, right? Locations that I've already visited. Should I go back to them and things like that. It's just a good way to formulate my thoughts. This is something that I imagine different people are going to do in different ways, but this is what I really like to do. And then when we get down to the character building, well, this is going to be interesting because I'm going to need to invent some new characters. So my protagonist is in fact the same. But something that has been a highlight through this series is the antagonist has changed. Now, if you've ever taken my series course or maybe watched some of my videos on it, you will know that, in my opinion, that means this is a more episodic series. And that is true. It is not super linear in terms of having a main conflict that stretches throughout exactly. There are some world situations, if that makes sense, things brewing in the world. But until you get to the third book, there isn't exactly a through line where there is something missing, right? But in the third book, that kind of shifts. And so I have to decide whether or not the character that's the kind of the antagonist in the third book is really the antagonist of the fourth book or not. Um, I think not. And then that means, well, I'm now going to have to invent who my antagonist is for this work. So I can go ahead and I can populate the character builder with the different characters that I already have. Again, thinking of their purpose in the story. But when it comes to the main driving characters, protagonist, antagonist, relationship character, distraction character, those characters are going to shift in this book. There's going to be some new characters and perhaps some characters that take different roles than normal. All right, so I have continued to flesh this out. So I have my main character, Rose, and things like that, and then I ended up with different antagonists and things like that. I actually went ahead and used the story builder to create this, which is why it's kind of funny. It says Mr. Roberts, which is the name of a character from the first book. That's not going to be the name of the character for now, but for the purpose of this, I'm okay with keeping his name that because, whoops, where am I? I'm okay with keeping his. All right, so I'm going to use the story builder to sort of flesh out these other characters. I put in some of the answers of some of the characters that are going to come in, and I've had it come up with other characters. Now, I don't particularly love the name Luna Evergreen. I mean, Luna is a great character in Harry Potter, but it's just so iconically that, and Luna Lovegood, Luna Evergreen. I don't know. It feels very similar, so I'm not going to do that. However, yes, this character is that sort of character that I needed. So I'm going to go ahead and go with this for now. And the reason character, again, Dr. Marcus Reed, maybe, I don't know, but I definitely want this sort of character here, so that makes a lot of sense. You can see the difference between the one that I wrote and the one that the analyzer wrote there. And then opposition character, right? These are characters that are playing a little bit of a different role. They're being thrown in there because this story is going to have some unique characters in order to do that. Now, when it comes to the plot, what I did was I jumped to the end and I started writing where I want my ending to go. So I have my ending here, and then I have my midpoint, and then I have my inciting incident. But I don't have much in between. And I am going to start using the I'm going to start using the story builder in order to brainstorm that. Let me go ahead and move this over so you can see better. So I have my little yellow button, right? And, it'll give me some suggestions on what I can do. And it's just a great starting point. So I really think that can be a fun way of brainstorming a story is you start with your three kind of main points: your inciting incident, your midpoint, and your ending. And then you run the story builder for everything else. Unless, of course, you are automatically have ideas for everything else. And to some degree, I do. But, I often say don't settle on your first idea, right? So rather than me just kind of settling, I have what's in the back of my head. I'm going to see what it's going to give me. And I might even run it a few times in order to see whether or not I like the suggestion or not. And so then I can, keep running it, seeing if I like it, keep running it, seeing if I like it, right? Tinkering, putting in my own perspective, etc. So, for example, with the opening, I don't know if it's going to actually have the opening correct. I probably will need to prompt it more. Let's see. Actually, no, I kind of like this to a certain extent. Yeah, I'm gonna be okay with keeping that for now. I'm gonna tweak it later, but it gave me an idea I didn't naturally think of as a way to start out the opening. Oh, I also really like this. Yeah, that's a really good suggestion. Okay, so I'm gonna keep going here. Uh, Yeah, no, this isn't working. So, I'm gonna have to go in and get adjustments and stuff like that. And automatically I can say how some of it is going to be correct. I probably could have given it an opening as well because I didn't establish like where the story starts in my head. But I kind of wanted to know where it wanted to start the story. And to some degree, it immediately gave me a suggestion of something I didn't think of as a good opening scene that would be a little more interesting than what I had in mind. So I really like that, and I'm going to incorporate it. And so I'm just going to keep running these and getting different suggestions. The nice thing is because I have my linchpin moments, it shouldn't go completely off the rails. And that will be really helpful. All right, so this all makes sense. And then we have the inciting incident, and now we're going to see where the debate goes. Or we're going to see what happens here. Okay, this makes sense. It's a little bit vague, though. I'm going to see if it can give me something a little bit more concrete than that. Yes, this is correct. This is exactly what I had in mind already. It's just giving flat. The nice thing about it is that when you give it a lot of signposts, right? By the time I give it, because I started out too, giving it a whole story premise up here as well. I filled it out, which is kind of a basic idea of what's going on. And so what this is doing is it's just fleshing out my ideas, right? It's just saying, okay, if you want to do that, these are all the implications, and it's making it sound a little bit more flowery just instantly for me. So it's just able to expand what is already going in my head a little bit. And maybe pulling me in a few directions, but honestly, for the most part, it's not really doing that. It's mostly pretty much kind of reading my mind again because I've given it a lot of information to go off of, right? I'm not just sitting there being like, write me a story. Boop, 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 boop. Like I'm like, this is the character, this is motivation. This is the character, this is their motivation. This is what's going to happen in the story. Now give me the beats, right? And so it's just a really helpful way to speed up the process of brainstorming because it gives me something to react to, right? It gets it out of here and into here, and then I can start reacting to it. There's a lot of things that are going to change about this before it's done, but what this gives me is an initial opening, outline to work on. Um, And it's great because it's that little connective tissue between them. It tells me how I can get from here to here. At least here's an option. This is exactly what I had in mind, so that's good. And now I'm curious what it's going to suggest as the B story. I have an idea for the B story. Yep. That's pretty much what I had. Now, obviously, again, I didn't have the idea of Luna Evergreen or Marcus Reed, but I had an idea of those types of characters as being a relationship story. Yeah, I almost always like a relationship story as my B plot because I don't write romance, and I think relationships are the best way to have the character doing something and showing how they feel and things like that. This is going to be a friendship story, not a love story. The person they're in love with is actually apprehended for the majority of the story. They don't come back into it until the middle here. Okay, don't exactly like that. I don't want those sort of obstacles. So I'm kind of curious what else it comes up with here. Okay, so it definitely wants to lean into these things hard. And it's an interesting idea. This isn't where I wanted to go, and I don't think this is where I want to go. So if I can't get it off of this track, then this is going to be a part where I'm definitely going to have to move it myself because it's picking the path of least resistance, and I'm not digging it. Yeah, I'm not. Some of this is okay, but no, this is not really where I want to go. So I'm just going to delete this for now, and I'm going to keep going. That's going to be something I'm going to need to fill in. Now, like I said, I pretty much filled in the entire end already. Obviously, you can see the difference with mine, which are pretty light right now. Yes, this is correct. This is exactly what I would want and all of that, and all of that, and all of that. Yeah. All right. So at this point, I have a pretty basic outline, right? If I were to extrapolate this whole thing, you can see I have quite a lot to go on. And so at this point, what I'm going to do is continue to expand, right? Continue to expand, continue to adjust. And essentially, what I'll do is like a developmental edit of the outline. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to look at conflicts in every scene because I'm going to start to think about what kind of scenes would take place in order for this to happen. Am I going to keep the audience's attention? Is this going to be intriguing? I'm going to think of things like try-fail cycle. I generally like two major tries at something and then an ultimate fail. In this case, one of the biggest things that's going to come into play is negotiation. So I need to figure out ways to have negotiation scenes beforehand so that you can see the character getting better at it as they go. Um, what else is there? Conflict. I also want to do like a character arc. Now, think I did start with somebody asked me actually just recently. I think it was Tammy. Shout out to Tammy. Great question. Characters, can you start by brainstorming your characters? And that's exactly what I like to do. I like to think of all of the different, because I think of a main problem, and then I think of all the different worldviews in terms of how you would approach that problem. And then I like to put those characters in the story and I like them to interact. And the question is what worldviews are going to predominate the story, right? Is it going to be a story predominated by an emotional reaction to the problem or a logical reaction to the problem? Somebody who doesn't want to deal with the problem, somebody who just wants to kind of do something with the problem, right? And all of those views will be represented, but I get to decide kind of what's the prominent one and also how they interact with one another. How would somebody who wants to who would react emotionally, how might they respond, right? And then I get to determine what the outcome is of all of that. So I look at all of that and I make sure all of them have something to do in all of that. I also need to just look at the free money on the ground, like I have to say. This is ultimately a story about people with superpowers and interesting things. So ultimately, what do you want? You want some cool things happening with powers. So I would need to go through and make sure there are cool things happening with powers on a regular enough basis that you don't feel like all of a sudden it stops becoming what you want, which is again people doing cool things, right? So I would look at that. And then certain things about pacing and things like that, I would also want to look at, do I feel like there's action throughout? And then, of course, just general tension. What's creating the tension throughout? When do people know what they need to know? When is the foreshadowing dropped in and things like that? So there are multiple ways that you can do this. What generally I would do at this point is I'm going to still tinker within the story builder, get all these points exactly what I want. And then once all this is done, I am going to extract it into a note. So first I'll tie it to a file. Right now it's just floating out there, right? So I need to actually save this book for, which is going to be called variant, right? Okay. So ultimately I would close this, and when I'm done, and I could even do this now. I'm making a lot of progress. I would say write this idea in a new file. And then once I write a new idea on a new file, it's going to follow me into the writer's desk and I can start writing in here. And ultimately, I can go to the story builder and it's already in here. But like I said, once I'm done with this, I still like keeping it bucketed. I just like this format. I find it very easy to navigate and easy to figure out where I am. Once I'm done with all of this and I feel like it's done, I will copy it to a note. And that's so it's just one document that I can just kind of read through and consider in terms of some of those different things. I also want to have it just in case I end up accidentally hitting that yellow button or making adjustments. So I have like the current form, right? Once I get it to a stage I like, that's kind of like draft one of my outline. So copying it to a note cements that. It takes it out of the story builder. And so then I can keep tinkering in the story builder and not lose it in case I make some adjustments and then decide I want to go back to the other one. Okay. So anyway, that's where I'm at in the process now. I've made some strides. I'm a little bit behind where I wanted to be by, well, by the 14th, which is our check-in, which is Monday. I really do want to have the outline pretty close to finished. I wasn't expecting to actually start drafting until about a week later. I mean, your mileage may vary. Obviously, if you're trying to finish a book in 90 days, which is what we're trying to do, you're going to want to start drafting fairly soon, depending on how fast you draft. I have a tendency to draft pretty fast because I have so much thought out that it's execution and it's not a lot of thinking about, well, what happens next and things like that. It's like I pretty much know, so I just have to let it play out. It's a little bit algorithmically in my head, if that makes sense. It's like I'm my own chat GPT or something where I'm like, what do I need? All right, blah, 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 blah. It feels a lot like that. It tends to feel very fluid as long as I'm in a good zone. I'm not going to say I don't have bad days or things like that, but usually the words come out pretty fast. I can write like 3,000, 4,000 words a day once I have what I know I need to do in my head. And so that obviously means I could draft the whole book within a month, no problem. And so I'm not really behind schedule exactly. I wish I was a little bit further because I really do want to cement and get this outline exactly where I want it. I'm pretty happy with where it is. At least I have an idea of what I'm doing. I mean, this would be kind of a planting, well, maybe not completely planting. Depends on how much you plan when you plant for you. For me, this would feel like planting if I went ahead now because I have enough of an idea, but I'm like, it's not quite cemented and there's a lot of things to think about. So I want to go that step further. And like I said, by the 14th, the check-in, we have a planner check-in. That's like my accountability. So the check-in's working for me too, for all of you in Novel 90. And I will see where I'm at. My hope is that that's pretty much done. And then I can spend the next little while, the next week or so, like, all right, really getting meticulous, right? Really going down to the scene level and to, everything that I want to have happen. And then I will start drafting. But if you're almost to the drafting stage, again, just a shout out to the planners out there in Novel 90. Awesome, that's fine. If you want more time to draft, that's cool. One thing also to keep in mind if you're a planner and you do this well, and you have a good outline and you have a good sense of the rhythm of the story and you're not going to create a lot of plot holes for yourself or things like that, is that your editing stage shouldn't be as rough either. You won't need as much developmental editing. It'll be a lot more polishing. It'll be a lot more, did you say it well? Not what are you even saying? And so again, that gives you more wiggle room in December than perhaps some other people have. So if your drafting goes a little bit into December, it may not be so rough. But you're going to have to figure out your own schedule based on what you need to think about is, if I if I have an idea of everything I'm going to do, how fast do I actually draft, right? And if I'm really committed, obviously, uh, some people too, they'll burn out or things like that. So just keep that in mind as you move forward. But yeah, I mean, it's been an interesting process. I've really enjoyed doing this with you, and I'll be honest, I've appreciated the accountability. I do not think. Well, it's not even I don't think. There would be no way I'd be getting this book done if it wasn't for all of you. So thank you. Thank you very much because I am getting excited about it again. I am looking forward to getting these words on the page. I'm just looking forward to writing again, right? I don't think this book series by the time I'm done is going to be some great masterpiece. I think it'll be a fun popcorn series. It's got some great moments, it's got some good characters, it has some interesting, thoughtful things. And I just want to get it done, right? I feel like to some degree, I'm a victim of, often I say, "Are you a writer?" It's like, well, what have you finished? And I have finished books, but I haven't finished like the whole point of what I was doing with this. And I feel like that will be a weight off of my back. And I think once I get that weight off my back, I'm going to be a much stronger writer. I've been spending so much time on the analytical side and the editing side, and maybe that's even my best foot forward, right? But getting into the writing side again though is great because it's helping me realize what everybody else goes through, and that'll make me a better coach and a better analyzer as well. So it's all good basically is what I'm saying. All good things. I'm enjoying this process. I hope you're enjoying going through this process with me. If you have any questions, please comment below if you want me to get more specific about things. At this point, it's going to get a little bit tricky because obviously I'm going to be getting into the work, and I'm not expecting any of you have read the first 3 books. So for me to like go through a lot of detail as to why I'm making personal decisions about this, that, and the other thing might get tricky. So I'll try to keep it at a high enough level so that you can relate to it, in terms of what's going on in my head, what's my process, and things like that. And I certainly hope you continue to find it interesting as we kind of get into the weeds of doing the thing. But anyway, this is where I'm at. This is where I'm at in the outlining process. And yeah, I will see you all next week. Bye, everybody.